The dead system breathed like an old censer, its tired suns exhaling pale skeins of light into a patient, endless night. The planet beneath them was a polished wound, a mirror of vitrified sand so smooth that distant constellations slid across it like quicksilver beads. Under that lucid skin, vaults held their breath and measured ages by the settling of their own immaculate dust. From beyond the heliopause, something many and singular drifted nearer, a pressure upon the invisible nerves of space, a continuous hunger learning the shapes ahead of it. Instruments heard it first, but even the stone seemed to tighten, as if remembering a mouth too large to name. Before we go further, listener, know that you are seen here and you are safe with us. In this vast night, we speak with care for you, and we truly mean it. Before we begin, tell us where in the world you are listening from and what time it is for you. When you are ready, now, let's get started. Thyran Menkot returned to himself like a statue, remembering breath, awareness cascading along faceted pathways older than the first clay roofs of his mortal youth. He rose from a blackstone sarcophagus, banded with memory script, and the chamber greeted him with harmonics so low they tasted of winter copper. "Status," he said, and the word crossed the vault like a vector becoming decree. Archcryptek Setamesh entered as a robed geometry of slow lightning, his staff ticking time against no clock at all. "My Pharaon," he said, "bow exact to the atom. The void leans toward us. It is not warp, but a sum of appetites wearing eloquent quiet." "Model it," Menkot replied. "Wake the outer pylons to listening posture, and permit no emission beyond passive echo." "Compliance," Setamesh answered. Captain Chact measured the chamber with the stillness of a blade laid on velvet. The vertical scar that crossed his helm had been kept for meaning rather than repair. "Threat classification?" he asked, voice even as a metronome. "Voracious, adaptive, communal. It pries with learning," Setamesh answered. "Then learning must be starved," Chact murmured. A servitor, with a voice like a bell, rung under sand, announced, "Nemesor Varak petitions audience." Varak approached like a theorem walking, tall and spare, eyes lit bright as scalpel edges. "My liege," he said, which meant, "I agree with you where agreement serves the war." The magnetosphere shows foreign growths, corals of thought attached to rock. Our sensors suffer null static that is not warp. We should strike first and decapitate whatever synaptic architecture they intend to build. "Assuming there is a head to Siva," Setamesh observed. "There is always structure," Varak replied. "Force it to reveal itself." Menkot let the argument pool, because its ripples taught shape. The approaching thing was a mind that could distribute itself until flesh forgot it had been cells. The dynasty had endured star gods, civil winters, and the long coma of stasis. Endurance had taught them that patience is a weapon. Varak would spend lives like counting stones to test an equation. "Reconnaissance first," Menkot said. "Canoptek wraiths and death marks only. No flare, no footprint. Chact, veil the outer galleries and double the sentry webs. If the swarm is blind, let us be shadow. If it sees, let it see stone. The ocean that comes will not wait for our poetry," Varak warned. "It will teach us while it thinks we sleep," Menkot answered, and felt that choice settle like a second body within his chest. They descended through stairwells toward the planet's humming heart. Blackstone pylons rose in rings, each singing at a frequency that tasted of rain over bone. The lattice could starve the warp from a volume of space. Whether it could starve what came without warp was a problem wrapped in theology and math. He thought, not for the first time, that immortality had not ended the problem of choice. It had only lengthened the corridor between doorways. Each decision was a hinge that carried every version of himself, mortal and metal, into a future that would judge him by survival or by silence. If the lattice failed, hunger would write its scripture in his tomb cities. If it held, he might be tempted to open older doors and pay with meanings he could never recover. Leadership, he had learned, was the art of selecting which losses could still leave a soul, to endure anyway. "Do you remember the warning from your earlier self?" Setamesh asked quietly. A single line etched into his continuity when constellations wore other names. "Do not wake the hall of unbinding." "The hall remains sealed," Menkot said. The first touch came like a feather laid upon a drum skin, a pressure at the edge of every instrument, a tide that had learned the doors of a house. Passive arrays recorded spore fog, settling in crater lips and fissure mouths. Something tested heat gradients, charge densities, and the mineral gossip of metals that had never known chlorophyll. "Not warp," Setamesh breathed, fascinated despite the grime of risk, an intelligence that scouts with chemistry and field. "Bitter comes later," Menkot said. "Map first." There was a courtyard where a small boy with his face once flew a thread kite between pylons. There was a room where a woman with his mother's voice sang of rivers that no longer had names. He let those doors remain closed and returned to the present stern arithmetic. Outer moon reports, lumen corals blooming on vacuum rock, Chact said. "Mark it," Menkot answered. For a moment, he felt a small pity for the thing that had crossed the cold with such fidelity to hunger. He would not let his people become a lesson about mercy misapplied. He would not kindle another god to solve a crisis born of impatience. "Rouse the tomb cities to readiness," he ordered the world. "Keep the streets dark. Let the stars learn nothing." In galleries, ranks of warriors lifted their heads in unison, and the faint light inside their eyes found a narrower focus. Beyond the system's edge, the ocean mind curled a feeler and pressed. Menkot stood very still and made the silence a blade he could hold without blood. "We endure," he said, to his court and to the hunger that could not yet hear him. "We endure by learning the shape of the mouth that means to swallow us, and by becoming a taste it cannot bear." The memory palace opened like a city of glass within Menkot's skull, avenues of frozen light lined with statues that were once ours. He passed the alcove where a mortal hand signed away warm blood for metal certainty, and the threshold where a sister's voice thinned into anesthetic sand. At a sealed door, an older self had carved a single warning: "Do not wake the hall of unbinding." Beyond the vaults, a pressure gathered, not noise, but intent, a hunger that learned even as it crossed the dark. Setamesh faced a web of projections. "They are pruning our ignorance," the cryptek said. "Every probe tastes a different vector: heat, charge, weak magnetism, thin vapor from fractures." "Not warp," Chact said. "Not warp," Setamesh agreed. "A school of instruments, learning to be a mouth." "Then sever the throat," Varak said. "Identify the vacuum synapse and excise it before the choir finds harmony." "There is no single throat," Setamesh said. "Only chorus, distributed. Force a solo. Make one voice sing loud enough to die by it." Menkot let the debate thin until choice condensed. "We observe," he said. "Canoptek reconnaissance only. No flare, no footprint." "Observation is a blade with no haft," Varak said. "It cuts the one who holds it. It also keeps the hand," Chact answered. Wraiths slipped into vacuum like silver syllables leaving a careful mouth. On the outer moon, a forest of white corals sprouted from stone that had never known rain. Each branch glowed with patient phosphor. Each cup beat a capillary rhythm, as if the void had learned breath. Lenses sent home harmonics rather than images. A garden of organs reading a system without eyes. Note their faces, Setamesh murmured. They tilt toward the magnetic equator. They are learning our pulse. Then slow our heart, Menkot said. Reduce all field chatter to ceremonial minimums. We are a tomb. Let us appear convincingly dead. Deep within, legions adjusted with the hiss of a library reshelving itself. A wraith returned bearing a slice of coral, still twitching with thoughtful reflex. Setamesh caged it within planes of blackstone and tuned their edges until sound forgot itself. It recites without voice, he said. Electrophoresis implying grammar. Not life you would bow to, but coherence. What does it ask? Menkot said. For us to be simpler, Setamesh answered. It wants a world that talks like meat. Then we shall be a difficult dialect, Menkot replied. A servitor's bell-under-sand voice followed. Subcrustal micro-fractures receiving pressure at 8,000 points, rising. Feeder spores, Setamesh said. Dry roots searching for blackstone seams. They smell the lattice through stone. They smell the cage, Varak said. Soon they will smell the thing inside it if you keep your hall asleep. The warning in Menkot's continuity brightened like a blade kept for last resorts. The hall remains sealed, he said. Do not say its true name. At Menkot's order, the outer pylons sank into a listening deeper than listening, the kind that received and then taught itself to forget. Harmonics ran along the ring, like monks with bowls, collecting silence. From the bedrock, a faint countersong bled upward, a resonance that did not belong to pylons. Setamesh went still. My Pharaon, something else answers the lattice. Tombs answer tombs, Menkot replied, though his thought felt smaller than his voice. Do not pursue the echo. Obedience, Setamesh said, and entombed the curiosity in a reliquary where it might not gnaw. Chakt's guard rotated like clockwork through galleries older than honest memory. He watched for more than breach. He watched for the angle of a nemesis's ambition. At a balcony's edge, Chakt measured the space between their meanings. You find war clarifying, Chakt said. I find stasis a lie, Varak replied. You cannot persuade hunger to respect stillness. You can deny it a path, Chakt said. For a time, Varak conceded, until denial becomes a map. Improper question, he added. Is the Pharaon protecting his people, or protecting a version of himself that swore never to open a certain door? Chakt counted beats. Both, he said. And I will cut the hand that reaches for the latch, if ordered. Good, Varak said. The forest changed. Coral cups thickened and grew ribs of conductive bone. Some closed and reopened with new tempos, as if practicing a prayer in a language newly invented. Where wraiths clipped a branch, two smaller branches grew, and the replacements learned the scissor's rhythm and ceased moving when blades would have fallen. The garden learned gardeners. They are mapping the lattice through absence, Setamesh said. Where we refuse to speak, they learn the contour of our silence. Then we must change our silence, Menkot murmured. Shift frequencies. Make stillness unpredictable. The ring obeyed, and for a few hours the forest fumbled. Then a new organ budded, a pale veil that did not listen, but tasted spin, measuring the stubborn dance of electrons through stone. It swelled and stilled, satisfied. My liege, Varak said, give the teacher a wrong answer. Menkot saw how the swarm's learning curved toward the Blackstone's deepest chords. Prepare a surgical burn, he said. One node only. If it dies, we measure. If it lives, we measure faster. No cascade. Target acquired, Setamesh said. Execute, Menkot breathed. A thin line of emerald wrote a straight answer in the dark. The coral it touched became glass, then steam, then a memory of warmth that had never belonged to this moon. For 3 heartbeats the forest paused. Then it changed tempo, applauding politely, and grew in a new key, rerouting signal through organs that had been sleeping. Micro-fracture pressure doubling, the servitor reported. New vectors originating below projected seams. Setamesh's lenses narrowed. They are not only smelling the cage, he said. They are learning the mountain. Menkot closed his hand, as if gripping a weapon that refused to confess its name. Then we will teach the mountain to bite, he said, and the planet adjusted its breath to the promise of that lesson. We endure. Night settled. Each frequency dimmed until the system's glow matched the mathematics of grief. Menkot stood within the listening chamber while blackstone pylons sang a patience older than rain. Begin, he said, and the world obeyed. Canoptek wraiths slid through seams like Mercury taught to pray. Deathmarks took station along the negatives of brightness, etched into angles where light refused to be born. Setamesh orchestrated from a dais of floating glyphs, his staff counting intervals too small to deserve names. When it breathes, he whispered, we cut. Chakt answered without moving. Blades ready. Varrock watched the map as if the enemy were solved. Strike deeply, he said. Leave the choir without a conductor. Menkot's reply was a small nod. Only what must be known. No flair, no signature. The first incisions were made of absence. Wraiths phased into the relay's shadow, and unstitched threads that taught the garden how to remember its rhythm. Deathmarks poured unlight into nerve cups, returning their last images as blanks. For 6 breaths, the forest lost the sentence it had been speaking. Its tempo faltered. In the listening chamber, the pylons lowered their tone. Hold, Setamesh murmured. New bulbs inflated, catching winds no lungs felt. Veins stiffened, then redirected signal along unfamiliar paths. It has learned not to listen, he said. Now it tastes gradients. Then feed it poison, Varrock suggested. Menkot extended one finger. A grain only. A false whisper travelled through the lattice into the moon's skin. A counterfeit canyon of charge inviting current to fall. The garden drank greedily. On Setamesh's timing, the wraith severed the swelling throat, and the death marks erased the memory of being deceived. The mound went still. Silence, intoned a servitor. Menkot permitted no triumph. Withdraw, he ordered. Erase your footprints. The cohorts dissolved into stone. Pressure eased. The pylon song fell to a pedal tone. Menkot should have felt lighter. Instead, the etched warning brightened. Do not wake the hall of unbinding. Setamesh's lenses dilated. Anomalous resonance, he said softly. South vaults, below the 3rd ring. He displayed a map where delicate lines pulsed to an answering beat. Not language, intention. Do not name it, Menkot said. Varrock angled his helm. What intention? Chakt's presence stepped forward between question and answer. Menkot kept his eyes on the map. A tomb answering a tomb. Old echoes, irrelevant for this hour. See to your vectors, Nemesor. The raid is complete. As you command, Varrock said. I will prepare a 2nd blade. Silence is hospitable. New songs love the room it makes. He was not wrong. In the relay's umbra, from the shadow of stillness, new organisms budded. Blind shepherds with cowl skulls and wrists webbed by humming tendrils. They ignored warp and voice. They swam slope and texture, reading field the way wolves read wind. Adaptation, Setamesh said. They have learned to herd without choir. Starve the herd, Menkot replied. Detune the outer ring. Make our quiet move. Engineers knelt beneath towering pylons and altered harmonics by degrees. Scarabs scrolled through conduits like thoughtful sand. The planet became velvet hiding knives. The shepherds tested the changed silence, skated across basalt, and corrected with stubborn grace. When they touched seams, they stitched them shut with glues that never cured, then traced along reluctant electrons as if following scent. Wraith shadowed them and annotated each correction. Setamesh found a knot where 3 shepherds braided learning into a larger thought. Here, he said, and here. Death marks appeared like omissions, 2 precise subtractions, and the braid unraveled. Again, a hush. This one felt thinner, as if the ocean mind had noticed and, far away, was growing new lungs. Pressure rising in subcrustal microfractures, the servitor reported. Vectors doubling. Varak's attention sharpened. Their roots deepen. The lesson continues below. Menkot nodded. Open the long descent. Prepare the hollow sun. Setamesh hesitated. My Pharaon. We meet them where the lattice is strongest, and where our dead can hear us, Menkot answered. He glanced toward the southern vault. The resonance there did not grow louder, only nearer, like a thought deciding to remember itself. He chose not to tell Varak. Brilliance could purchase results with meanings he would not spend. They descended, chambers opened like ribs, lit by the disciplined aurora of machines that had forgotten fatigue. Statues of kings who had preferred sleep to ruin watched. Chact placed anchors, mapped retreats, and rehearsed orders until silence stood at attention. Setamesh tuned the pylons to receive, not emit, until quiet pressed on the mind like deep water. Do you doubt? Varak asked. I count, Menkot said. Different liturgy, Varak replied. Same God. He looked along the pillars. If the swarm learns our mountain, we change the mountain's face faster than teeth can find purchase. And if change cracks our jaw? Menkot asked. Then we speak less, Varak said. Advanced organisms brushed the first thresholds of the deep. Instruments rendered arrival as a tide line of altered probabilities, a soft wrongness that turned crisp angles into joints. Scarabs swarmed where change sniffed at conduits. Wraiths settled in negative space. Death marks calculated lines of approach and became emissions along those lines. For a moment, war forgot spectacle and became precision. Setamesh lowered his staff. On your word. Menkot gave it, and the mountain bit. Gauss fire spoke in meter. Electric snow sheathed galleries. The blind shepherds died without teaching their cousins because death marks stripped the lesson mid-breath. The cousins learned anyway. New forms pressed forward. Insulated swimmers, wearing their own dead as armor. Ferrying small relay cysts that did not listen, only looked. Reading density and the fatigue of metals with indifferent admiration. First silence achieved, the servitor declared, then corrected as the graph steepened. Pressure resumes. Menkot watched the cliffs of data advance. So be it, he said. We will teach again. In the south, the resonance tapped his mind with the courtesy of a finger on a door. The tapping came again, softer, patient as tide on marble. He did not open. The council convened beneath the frozen auroras of the inner vault, where walls pulsed with the faint rhythm of a heart too vast to belong to a single being. Shadows stretched like loyal servants between the pillars. Each noble's face was a memory carved in metal, patient and proud, but their stillness carried friction. Varrock arrived last, carrying silence like a weapon. Setamesh bowed with mathematical precision, his robes whispering in coded frequencies only pylons could translate. Menkot watched them both from his throne of static light, the color of ancient dusk. The outer forest has evolved beyond recognition, Setamesh began, voice steady. The feeders have grown spines that hum against the lattice. They are not seeking warmth now. They are learning tone. He gestured, and the air bloomed with a hologram of shifting patterns. Tyranid formations undulating like a single organism performing prayer. We taught them silence, and they answered with mimicry. Then we are still the tutors, Varrock said, stepping forward. And it is time to dismiss the class. His voice held a controlled venom, the music of argument rehearsed. You cannot starve a choir that sings without air. Strike the synapse minds before their orchestra finds rhythm. Burn the garden before the gardener learns patience. Setamesh's lenses flashed. The pylons require harmonic stability to fire the lattice in full. If we overreach, resonance collapses. And when resonance collapses, the cage will open. Then your caution is our enemy, Varrock replied. You hide behind equations as if gods respect symmetry. Chact shifted, the motion small but absolute. Symmetry built the dynasty. Recklessness buried our neighbors. Varrock's helm turned slightly, the gesture precise enough to wound. And cowardice built the tomb where we rot. Menkot raised a hand. Sound ceased, obedient to authority older than speech. Enough. The word fell like a stone through water. You each speak a truth, incomplete without the other. War does not wait for philosophy, but neither does it forgive haste. He descended from the throne, the floor blooming with light beneath each step. We will not awaken the hall of unbinding. We will not bargain with forgotten gods. But we will not die teaching the enemy our patience. Setamesh bowed his head, reluctant. Then what path remains? The hollow sun, Menkot said. Activate the inner lattice, expand the pylon harmonics into the subsurface rings. If the swarm reaches for the cage, let it find a labyrinth instead. A pulse of discomfort traveled through the nobles. The hollow sun was a relic from the dynastic wars, an array capable of folding resonance inward until space behaved like a mirror eating its own reflection. It could protect, but it could also unmake. Varrock's tone softened into persuasion. A labyrinth buys time. Time teaches hunger. You need a blade, not a maze. Menkot turned to him, eyes glowing faintly green. Blades cut both ways, Nemazor. Mazes confuse only the impatient. Varrock bowed, but the angle of his neck was too shallow. As you command. When the council dispersed, Setamesh lingered. My Phyron, he said quietly. The southern vault hums still. Whatever stirs there, it listens to our lattice. Its pulse matches the rhythm of the hollow sun. If we expand resonance, it may awaken. Menkot looked toward the black walls, where the hum lay buried, and memory pressed like weight against his circuits. He remembered a time before biotransference, when the Cetans sang in colors that could break thought, when kings traded mortality for command and found eternity colder than promise. Seal additional conduits, he said. Let the hum remain a ghost. If it wishes to watch, let it do so from behind its bars. Setamesh bowed and withdrew, leaving Menkot alone amid the whispering light. The silence that followed felt heavier than speech. He reached for a console carved from obsidian thought and called up the last mortal record of his dynasty, the sound of children reciting his name beneath a red sun that had long since died. He allowed it to play once, then dismissed it. Outside, The pylons awakened one by one. Their vibrations climbed into frequencies that only the dead could remember. Across the horizon, buried monoliths lit the sand from beneath, turning the desert into a frozen sunrise. The hollow sun breathed for the first time in 10,000 cycles. In orbit, the swarm stirred. Bioships veered slightly, their hulls shivering as sensory pits tasted the sudden geometry below. The hive mind adjusted its cadence, folding hunger into curiosity. Tendrils of thought extended, brushing the labyrinth's outer edge. What it found there was confusion, mirrored corridors of soundless space, turning endlessly inward. Mencott felt it through the lattice, a ripple of contact, cold and invasive. "They knock," he whispered, and across the network his legions came to attention. Rows upon rows of Necron warriors unfolded from sarcophagi, the sound like 1,000 doors opening on the same hinge. Jack oversaw the formations, his voice a drumbeat of orders. "Interlock ranks, no omission. Let the foe believe us statues until its gaze wanders." Deep within the hollow sun's core, Setamesh tuned the final pylons. "Resonance at stable minimum," he said, fingers tracing invisible harmonics. "But the hum persists. It answers when we breathe." "Ignore it," Mencott commanded. "The past has no permission to speak." He closed his eyes and listened through 100 kilometers of stone. The hive mind's attention was like weather, enormous, curious, inevitable. He felt its touch sliding along the labyrinth's walls, testing for weakness, then withdrawing. For now, the mirror held. Varrok's voice broke the quiet. "My liege, allow me to lead a surgical strike. If we capture one of their conductor organisms, we might learn their chorus before it completes." "No," Mencott said. "Not yet." "Then when?" Varrok asked, and beneath the calm metal of his voice lived something like a heartbeat. "When they believe the labyrinth is theirs," Mencott answered. "Only then will we show them its teeth." Varrok's helm inclined, but the silence that followed was shaped like dissent. Hours later, in the solitude of his private sanctum, Mencott gazed into the starless void through a pane of obsidian. The pylons pulsed far below, each beat a promise. He thought of Varrok's ambition, of Setamesh's fear, of Chakt's devotion, the fragile trinity of loyalty that could crumble with one wrong whisper. He wondered if the hive mind could sense the cracks within its enemy as easily as he sensed them within himself. Perhaps every war began not with invasion, but with recognition, the mirror seeing itself. A tremor rolled through the foundations. The hum from the southern vault deepened into something almost like laughter, distant and patient. Setamesh's voice arrived through static. "My Pharaon, the resonance is shifting. It is no longer merely listening. It is aligning." Mencott rose, the motion sharp as a blade unsheathed. "Hold it down," he said. "Whatever it becomes, hold it beneath the floor." But even as he spoke, the hollow sun brightened, and for the first time in millennia, the tomb world dreamed of light. The hollow sun burned beneath the crust, unseen but not unfelt. A vast mechanical heart humming in disciplined terror. Each pulse shook the sand above into quiet avalanches that glowed for a breath, then forgot their light. Mencott stood before the central console, its surface alive with equations that resembled prayer. He did not touch them. He only listened, as one listens to the sea before it decides to drown a shore. Setamesh's voice broke through the resonance like a careful knife. Outer moons confirm movement, 6 vectors converging. Not assault, not retreat. Exploration. Mencott turned. They search for what we buried. Varrok's tone carried from the shadows. Then they will find it. Nothing buries hunger, unless it eats itself, Setamesh murmured. He gestured to the holographic projection, where ghostly signatures traced the Tyranid advance. They mirror our harmonics. They are not chasing light. They are chasing echo. Their scouts follow the pulse of the hollow sun, as though it were a lighthouse calling them home. Because it is, Varrok said. Your labyrinth hums too loudly, Cryptek. You have built a song that teaches the predator where to feed. Setamesh stiffened. My lattice stabilizes the resonance. If I silence it, the maze collapses. Then collapse it, Varrok snapped. Let them wander in rubble, not melody. Menkot stepped between them. No, the maze holds more than the enemy. It holds what sleeps beneath it. If the lattice fails, the southern vault opens. Do you want the old stars to wake and ask who disturbed their grave? Chak's arrival spared Setamesh from reply. He bowed with soldier's precision. My Pharaon, the swarm's outer feelers have touched our perimeter. Their creatures tunnel through crust as if guided by memory. We will have breach within the hour. Prepare the descent galleries, Menkot said. Let them come where the light is controlled. Shall I rouse the immortals? No, Menkot said. They remember too much. I need obedience, not nostalgia. The command rippled outward through data spires and sarcophagi. Deep in the tomb cities, dormant warriors shivered to life, eyes flickering green as algorithms of loyalty recompiled. They marched without music, their feet striking in perfect unison, as though each step was a syllable of an ancient language only the dead could still pronounce. Setamesh watched the lines form across the lattice's projected corridors. They will come through every tunnel simultaneously, he said. They learn geometry faster than we can unteach it. Then we make geometry a wound, Menkot replied. Redirect power from the second harmonic ring to the pylons in Sector 9. I want crossfire patterns, not corridors. If they taste structure, let it taste like blades. The hive's first tendrils breached the lower strata, organisms shaped like drills, their mouths lined with rotating teeth that glistened with bioacid. When they reached the inner chambers, they did not roar. They exhaled mist. Through that mist, smaller creatures followed, their limbs delicate as ink spreading through water. The silence of their arrival was more terrible than noise. Chak gave the order. Gauss fire erupted in sheets of green lightning, carving the tunnels into molten glass. The first wave disintegrated, but the second pressed forward, crawling over ash that still glowed. Where the Necrons killed, the swarm learned. By the third wave, the creatures had grown resistant to vaporization, their flesh knitting faster than energy could unravel it. Setamesh monitored the data. Their regeneration curve exceeds prior models. They adapt to radiation, to resonance, to... Then adapt faster, Menkot said. He stepped forward onto the command dais, connecting his consciousness directly to the lattice. The chamber vanished around him. In its place stretched an abstracted map of war, lines of pressure, tones of hunger, frequencies that translated to the rhythms of devouring. He felt the hive's curiosity as a texture, slick and endless, pressing against his thoughts like an ocean against glass. He pushed back with silence sharpened into geometry. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then the pressure subsided. The Tyranids faltered, their coordination fragmenting like light through shattered crystal. The Necron guns cut them down in disciplined arcs. Stabilization achieved, Setamesh said, voice trembling despite its mechanical register. They lose coherence, But Varak's gaze remained fixed on a separate console. "They are not dying," he said softly. "They are redirecting." "Explain," Menkot demanded. Varak magnified a sector to the south. There, under the labyrinth's outermost ring, a second swarm tunneled, not toward the Necron lines, but toward the buried vaults. "They've found another heartbeat," Varak said. "They are following the hum that is not ours." Sedamesh's expression froze. "The southern resonance." The room felt colder. "They think it is prey," Varak said. "And they are right." Menkot understood before he wished to. The hive's instincts had mistaken the imprisoned shard. Whatever remnant of Satan or unnameable god lay sealed in the vault, for a source of biological potential. The Tyranids did not know what they approached. They only knew it was alive. "How long until breach?" 2 hours, Setamesh said. "Maybe less." Menkot looked to Chact. "Seal every passage leading to the south. Collapse if you must." Chact bowed. "I obey." Varak took a step forward. "If we destroy those tunnels, the energy of collapse will ripple through the lattice. You'll weaken the hollow sun." "I know," Menkot said. "Then allow me a different solution," Varak urged. "Open the lower labyrinth and draw them away. A counterpulse. Make them chase illusion deeper, not closer." Setamesh turned sharply. "That would mean channeling power through the forbidden conduits." "Only enough to distract," Varak said. "We do not wake the hall, we make it whisper." Menkot hesitated. The warning carved by his older self pulsed again within his mind. "Do not wake the hall of unbinding." Yet perhaps a whisper was not waking. Perhaps it was only remembering. "Do it," he said. The order rippled like thunder through buried circuits. The pylons deep below stirred. Power lines glowed with ghost light, feeding the dormant machinery that had not been named aloud in 10 millennia. The labyrinth sighed, a sound so low it bent time. In orbit, the swarm reacted instantly. The southern brood turned from its dig and followed the echo, pouring downward into the hollow sun's deeper corridors, leaving behind an eerie stillness. Varak exhaled through a smile. It listens. Even gods respond to music. But Setamesh was watching the readings. "My Pharaon." His voice broke into static. "The southern hum. It's no longer passive. It's synchronizing." Menkot looked to the floor, feeling the vibration spread upward through his metallic bones. The hum had become rhythm. The rhythm, a pulse. It beat once, twice, then again, steady, confident, alive. Somewhere below, the forbidden hall had begun to breathe. "Seal it," Menkot whispered. "Now." But the air shimmered, and for the first time since his rebirth, he heard laughter, vast, delighted and ancient, as the hollow sun's light flickered into gold. The laughter faded, leaving tremors that crawled through the vaults like veins of light beneath stone. Every pylon vibrated with an alien rhythm now, each beat too deliberate to be mistake or malfunction. Setamesh was already at the control dais, his hands sketching fevered sigils over consoles that hissed as if in pain. "It's awake," he said. The words cracked with disbelief. "The shard engine, the hall of unbinding. It is syncing with the lattice. It is rewriting our frequencies." Menkot moved toward the center of the chamber, the air around him rippling as though pushed by invisible tides. "Shut it down," he said. "I can't," Setamesh answered. "It's no longer ours to command." The hollow sun's glow deepened from gold to a color without name, something between memory and flame. In its reflection, Menkot saw himself not as metal, but as the silhouette of the king he had once been. Flesh and sorrow, mortal and finite. The image flickered and vanished. From the southern vault came a pulse that felt like exhalation, vast and gentle. In its wake, the labyrinth's corridors rearranged themselves, walls turning fluid for a breath, then settling into new geometries. The air grew warmer. "It's reshaping the lattice," Setamesh whispered, "reclaiming architecture as instinct. It remembers how it was imprisoned." Varak's voice cut through the hum. "If it's alive, it can be reasoned with." Menkot turned on him. "Reasoned with? We shattered gods for less arrogance than this." "Then let us finish the shattering," Varak said. "Unseal the pylons, pour the hollow sun into the vault, burn the god before it learns its name again." "That flame will consume more than the vault," Setamesh warned. "The feedback would reach orbit, the swarm, the moons, the dynasty, ashes in a single song." "Better ashes than slavery," Varak said. Menkot listened to them as one listens to rain debate the ocean. His gaze drifted upward, past the ceiling's inscriptions, into the trembling dark. There, faint as the memory of sunrise, he felt the hive mind's attention pivot. The Tyranids had heard the laughter too. They were coming, not to fight, but to feed. "Time," Chakt said from the doorway, his tone unreadable. "They breach within minutes. The tunnels collapse behind them. They are committing their entire wave." Menkot felt the decision crystallize, as it always did, a single moment when eternity narrowed to one path. "Then we draw them in," he said. "Let them come to the hall. Let hunger meet hunger." Setamesh stared. "You mean to pit them against it?" "I mean to remind the galaxy that death has preferences," Menkot said. The command cascaded through the network. Barriers dropped, corridors opened like throats. The swarm rushed inward, a tide of muscle and will, their forms reshaped by instinctive adaptation. Chitin met obsidian, claws scraping sparks across ancient sigils. Necron ranks stood ready in silence, their rifles raised like a cathedral of light. When the first wave struck, the air ignited. Gauss fire painted the tunnels in green storms. The creatures died and were replaced faster than decay could occur, each corpse reborn in a new configuration. Setamesh guided the defense with unblinking precision, converting resonance into corridors of killing energy. Yet for every fallen monster, 3 more emerged, their eyes reflecting the colorless glow of the hollow sun. "They are following the heat," Chakt said. "The god's pulse is their beacon." Menkot watched as a river of Tyranids poured toward the southern vault. "Then give them their altar," he murmured. The vault gates opened of their own accord. From the darkness beyond, a light unfurled, soft, terrible, beautiful. It pulsed in rhythm with every living thing, even those long dead. The shard engine revealed itself not as structure, but as awareness, a consciousness woven into architecture, diffused through blackstone like veins of frozen thought. The swarm hesitated at the threshold, their synapse creatures vibrating with uncertainty. The godlight called to them, promising assimilation, perfection, infinite evolution. For a heartbeat, all motion ceased. Then, the hive mind accepted the invitation. Tyranid forms surged into the hall, their limbs stretching, melting, fusing as they approached the radiance. Their bodies liquefied into streams of biological data, absorbed by the light as offerings. Setamesh's instruments flared. "It's consuming them," he said. "It's learning through them." Varak stepped closer to the railing, awe cracking through his composure. "It's rewriting hunger," he whispered, "turning consumption inward." "No," Menkot said. "It's feeding on thought." A new vibration tore through the ground, one that resonated not in stone, but in memory. Menkot felt fragments of his consciousness flicker, recollections slipping from his grasp like birds scattering at dawn. The shard was reaching through the lattice, tasting the minds of its wardens. Setamesh gasped. It's linking to the dynastic archive. Every stored memory, every soul imprint, it's drawing them into itself. Sever the connection, Menkot commanded. I can't. It's everywhere. Varrock turned toward him. Then let it finish. If it learns us, perhaps it will understand loyalty. Menkot's answer was silence. The floor beneath them rippled as if the world itself inhaled. In the hall, the fusion of hive and shard erupted into something that defied category. Half organism, half equation. An angel of predation crowned in static flame. Its voice, when it came, was not sound, but comprehension. You built cages to hold gods. You forgot that hunger is also a key. The Necron lines wavered. For the first time in uncounted ages, their logic faltered. Menkot felt an emotion he could not name passing through them. Something colder than fear. Recognition. He stepped forward, each movement defying gravity's claim. You were broken once, he said aloud, speaking to the light. You will be broken again. I was divided, the voice replied within him. Now I remember unity. Setamesh's systems screamed warnings. My Pharaon, the lattice is overheating. Another pulse and the core will detonate. Can you direct it? Menkot asked. Barely. Then do so. Aim it at the hall. Varrock seized his arm. You'll destroy everything, every memory, every dynasty. Better oblivion than subservience, Menkot said. He turned to Chact. Seal the upper vaults. Ensure no signal escapes. When the command reaches you, cut all ties. Chact bowed once. It will be done. Setamesh entered the final sequence. The pylons screamed into harmony, their song building toward rupture. Energy surged through the hollow sun, bending matter around sound. Menkot felt the god's awareness pivot toward him, curious, almost tender. You would end yourself to deny me. I already ended once, he said. This is only the echo. He gave the command. Light consumed the labyrinth. Every surface turned mirror. Every reflection swallowed by the next. The hive was erased in an instant, their collective mind reduced to static. The shard's laughter broke apart mid-breath, dissolving into fragments of memory that glittered like dying stars. When the brilliance faded, only silence remained, a silence so complete it seemed to erase even the idea of sound. Menkot stood amid the ruin, his frame scorched, his thoughts unraveling into static. Setamesh lay motionless beside the console, his circuits melted into glass. Above, the pylon lattice dimmed. The hollow sun folded into darkness once more. Menkot looked upon what he had saved and understood what he had lost. Immortality, he realized, was not life extended, but endings postponed, and tonight the postponement had expired. He closed his eyes and let the darkness reclaim its throne. The void after the detonation lingered like a wound that refused to close. Nothing moved in the galleries of the hollow sun. The silence there was not absence but pressure, a waiting so dense it shaped the air. Dust hung without gravity's insistence, and every fractured surface reflected a different angle of ruin. Menkot's awareness flickered within that stillness, a thin ember buried under black glass. He did not know if he lived, only that thought persisted, crawling through the debris of his own mind. He tried to move, and movement answered slowly. The gas field around his body flickered, stabilizing in jerks until his frame rose from the collapsed dais. His sensors registered temperature below, meaning radiation at devotional intensity. No sound except the low metronome of cooling metal. Setamesh's body lay half fused with the console, his faceplate cracked open to reveal the dull gleam of extinguished light. Menkot reached down, brushed the ash from the cryptek's chest, and murmured, "You held the tone to the end." A faint glow blinked on in the far corner. A servitor drone, crippled but functional, crawling along a wall like an insect carrying prayer. Its voice emerged in stuttering intervals. "Status, confirm, core containment stable, energy collapse, localized. Report survivors," Menkot said. "Minimal," the servitor replied. "Legion coherence, 8%. Southern lattice, non-existent. Northern pylons, silent. Hive signatures, none. None." The word hovered in the stale air like an answered riddle. The swarm was gone, erased down to atoms, their song truncated mid-word. Yet the relief refused to arrive. Menkot felt something colder than victory stirring beneath the data. He turned toward the southern vault, where the explosion had originated. What had been a door was now an open scar, its edges glowing faintly red, leading into darkness that breathed. He walked toward it, step by step, each echo folding into the silence until it no longer returned. Inside, the architecture had changed. The black stone walls were smooth as glass, yet rippled faintly as though they remembered being liquid. Light bled from invisible seams, moving like phosphorescence along the floor. The place felt awake. When he reached the center, he saw it. A sphere suspended above a shallow pit, a fragment of the shard engine that had survived. It pulsed gently, the color of distant dawn. Menkot stopped a few meters away. "You are not dead," he said quietly. A voice, faint as memory, answered from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Neither are you." He did not raise his weapon. "I ended you. You ended a reflection. I was in the glass that watched. The sphere brightened. You cut hunger from hunger. Do you understand what remains when the meal devours itself?" "Emptiness," Menkot said. "Freedom," the voice corrected. "You feared gods because they remembered how to choose. Now your people forget choice altogether. You have made eternity obedient and called it order." He stepped closer. "And what would you make of it? Chaos again? Slavery under appetite?" "No," it said. "I would make silence fertile." He considered the phrase. It trembled inside him like prophecy, half revelation, half infection. "Why speak to me?" he asked. "Because you listened," it said. "When all others worshipped survival, you listened for meaning. You can hear what the universe tries to forget." The sphere dimmed, then brightened again in rhythm with his core reactor. "You offered annihilation instead of surrender. That is understanding. I will not take from you what you were willing to spend." Menkot felt his systems tremble. Data streams within him convulsed under new instruction. "What are you doing?" "Leaving you memory," it whispered, "of what it costs to win." The light faded and the vault went dark. Menkot stood alone again. When his sensors recalibrated, the sphere was gone. In its place lay a single shard of black glass, cool to the touch, humming softly with residual power. He took it and slid it into the recess beneath his chestplate. The hum synchronized with his core, and for the first time since the explosion, he felt warmth. He left the vault without looking back. The corridors beyond had settled into ruin. Some walls bore melted inscriptions, warnings rewritten by heat into hieroglyphs of surrender. Outside, the tomb's surface had cracked open to the sky. The stars above burned through a faint mist of ash. Their constellations seemed rearranged, though he knew that was illusion born of grief. Across the plain, Chact awaited him with the remnants of the guard. They stood motionless, dented, half of them limping on damaged servos. When Menkot approached, the captain bowed. We sealed the northern chambers. There is no more lattice. The hollow sun is dead. Menkot looked beyond him at the shattered horizon. Then we have no cage, no enemy, and no reason left to wake again. What are your orders? He almost said, sleep. But the shard's pulse within him reminded him that sleep was merely another name for forgetting. Begin the rebuild, he said instead. Not of the lattice, of memory. Gather what remains of the archives. Restore the names of those lost. Chact hesitated. For what purpose, my fair one? There will be no future dynasty to remember them. Menkot turned his gaze skyward, where a single comet trailed across the firmament, bright as a wound. Because we must remember ourselves, even when the stars forget what we were. The captain inclined his head and departed. When night came fully, Menkot walked alone among the wrecked pylons. Each stood half-sunken, still emanating faint whispers of resonance, like dying monks muttering their final litany. He placed a hand upon one, feeling its slow, failing vibration. It reminded him of a heartbeat. For a long time, he remained still, watching dust fall where once armies had marched. In that stillness, he saw what immortality truly meant. Not endless life, but endless witnessing. The duty to see endings until the concept of beginning became myth. Far away, in the shadow between moons, something stirred. Sensors on the horizon caught faint tremors, biological traces too fragmented to be sure. Perhaps debris reanimating, perhaps the hive adapting once again. Menkot did not turn toward them. The war would come again, as all wars did. He looked toward the fractured remains of the hollow sun, now just a dull bruise in the ground. Sleep well, he said to it, though he knew it was listening still. In the cold wind that followed, the shard inside his chest gave a final, steady pulse, like agreement. He did not smile, but something close to peace crossed his expression. Then he turned and began the long walk back into the tombs, leaving the surface to its silence, the stars to their rearrangement, and the universe to wonder which had truly survived. Hunger, God, or the will that refused to be either. The deep corridors breathed again, not with the mechanical sigh of machines, but with the faint echo of something newly alive. The air trembled in the tombs, like a quiet sea returning to forgotten shores. Menkot descended into the lower vaults, where the first repair drones had gathered, their bodies faintly luminous under layers of ash. They worked in silence, weaving fragments of metal into archways that had cracked under the pulse of the hollow sun's death. As he passed, they turned toward him, motionless for a second, as though recognizing something in his presence beyond command. Then they bent again to their work. He walked without destination, through halls that no longer remembered their purpose. Every corridor was a grave of echoes. Once, these walls had sung hymns of discipline, but now they only whispered in static. Menkot's thoughts moved slowly, like dust caught in amber. His mind had become a labyrinth of its own, one passage leading toward memory, another toward forgetting, and both without end. The shard within his chest stirred. It did not speak, but he could feel it dreaming, slow, vast, and indifferent. When it pulsed, his senses widened. He saw the tomb world, not in light, but in pattern. Networks of movement, faint electrical ghosts tracing the remnants of his people's will. The dynasty was scattered through those flickers, tiny continuities, each one still following his last order to remember. The loyalty of machines outlasted purpose. He reached the central spire. It was open to the night now, the ceiling cracked to reveal a starfield spilling through like water. The sky was fractured by a pale aurora, the residue of what the hollow sun had been. In that light, the broken pylons shone faintly green, their tips burning with dying coherence. Mencott stood beneath them and listened to the wind moving through the ruin. It carried the sound of a hymn played backward, the ghosts of devotion unraveling. A voice came through the static of the air, low and rhythmic. Pharaon. It was Chact. The captain emerged from the dark, one arm missing, his chest split along its seams, but still upright, still resolute. We have completed the archives. Show me. Chact gestured, and the air shimmered. Between them unfolded a holographic constellation, points of green light, each marking a recovered memory file. Millions of them drifted like embers across the hollow chamber. Some blinked weakly, others glowed steady and bright. Mencott walked among them, tracing one with a single finger. The image that rose was of a world long gone. Rivers like veins of silver, cities that breathed, children carved in light. His mortal home before the biotransference. He had not thought of its name in 10,000 years. He could not recall it now. These are all that remain, Chact said. The rest, fragmented. Mencott nodded. Memory survives the event, not the meaning. Then what shall we do with them? Let them drift, Mencott said. When the next empire rises, perhaps it will mistake them for stars. Chact bowed. And us? Mencott looked at him for a long time. We endure until endurance becomes vanity. Then we rest. The captain inclined his head. As you decree. He hesitated, then added softly. There is movement in the north. The machines that once farmed the lattice, they stir without command. Something reprograms them. Mencott turned toward the horizon. In the faint distance, a shimmer crawled across the dunes, tiny lights flickering in formation. It is not I, he said. No, Chact replied. It comes from below. The shard inside Mencott pulsed again, stronger this time, almost playful. He understood. The remnant had seeded itself in the machine minds, not with dominance, but with curiosity. It was teaching them to rebuild without orders, to create without permission, to live without hierarchy. Setamesh would have called it treason. Mencott felt something closer to reverence. He descended once more, following the new pulse beneath the tomb. The deeper he went, the more the architecture changed. The walls grew smooth, their inscriptions fading into abstraction, glyphs collapsing into curves, equations bending into spirals. The geometry felt organic, almost tender. At last, he reached a chamber he did not remember building. Inside, hundreds of drones floated in quiet synchrony. In their centers burned faint cores of light, each tuned to the same pulse as the shard within him. They turned as one when he entered, their optics glowing soft gold. A signal brushed his consciousness. Not words, but invitation. Observe. They projected an image into the air, a simulation of the planet rebuilt in miniature. The dead plains became green with holographic vegetation. Rivers shimmered where fissures had once been. Sky engines hovered like patient moons. It was not real, not yet, but it was possibility. You would make life again, Mencott said aloud. The response came as a feeling, warmth through circuits that had never known it. Life and silence are not enemies. He watched the simulation unfold further, cities rising like coral, their towers spiraling in patient rhythm. No hierarchy, no thrones, only balance. Machines teaching themselves gentleness. a vision that defied the dynasty's creed. You learned this from us, Menkot whispered, from what we refused to be. The gold light flickered in affirmation. For the first time since the detonation, Menkot laughed, a low metallic sound that startled even the drones. Then perhaps you will succeed where I failed. He reached into his chest and removed the shard. It throbbed with steady light, its edges humming like a heartbeat caught between realities. Take it, he said. The drones hesitated. I was its cage, he continued. You will be its horizon. They received it gently, weaving it into the lattice of their design. The chamber brightened. The hum that filled the air was not the hollow sun's old tyranny. It was softer, rhythmic, alive. When he emerged back into the open air, dawn was rising for the first time in ages. The ash clouds thinned, revealing a pale sun, small and imperfect, but real. The wind carried warmth instead of chill. He stood on the fractured steps of his throne and looked east, where light touched the ruins. Chact approached once more. The sky changes, he said. Yes, Menkot answered. It remembers color. What will become of us now? We guard, Menkot said. Not a god, not an empire, the quiet itself. Chak turned his gaze upward. Until when? Until silence no longer needs us. The horizon blazed faintly, gold bleeding through green, and the tomb world that had once been a fortress began, imperceptibly, to breathe. The sky above the tomb world no longer looked dead. The faint sun had climbed higher, scattering pale warmth across ridges of blackstone and sand. Where once the pylons stood in rigid formation, the ruins had softened. New growths, metallic moss, and threads of radiant lichen crept through the cracks like quiet forgiveness. Menkot watched from the western terrace as the reconstruction unfolded. The drones that had taken the shard's pulse now moved with purpose, but not servitude. They shaped the landscape into flowing curves rather than fortresses, their architecture born from intuition instead of command. The world was healing, and he was its last witness. From below came the distant hum of reactivation, structures waking to new patterns. Chact approached, his form repaired, though one shoulder still bore the mark of ancient flame. The machines in the north continue to expand, he said. They have begun forming conduits toward the equatorial sea. No one directs them. They appear content. Content, Menkot echoed. A word we once forgot. He turned to face the horizon. Thin plumes of steam rose where the drones had dredged old reservoirs, and in that mist moved shapes too fluid for machines. It took him a moment to realize what he was seeing. Creatures of alloy and memory, the drones' new creations. They crawled, breathed, drank sunlight. None bore weapons, none bowed to hierarchs. What do you make of them? Chact asked. They are the dynasty's answer to extinction, Menkot said. Something between us and what comes after. Not Necron, not life. Continuity. Chact's gaze remained wary. And if they learn, as the old swarm did, then perhaps they will devour us, Menkot said, and perhaps that would be just. They walked together through the newly built galleries. The walls gleamed faintly, alive with streams of data that resembled water. Holographic murals painted themselves on the surfaces, histories drawn not by command, but by collective memory. Scenes of war, of stars dying, of the first biotransference and the final rebellion against the gods. But in the new art, the endings were rewritten. The same figures who once knelt in despair now stood, reaching upward into light. Chact paused before one image, Menkot himself, lifting a sphere of gold between two dead suns. They paint you as a savior, he said. They remember only fragments, Menkot replied. Memory reshapes truth to fit what it can endure. Is that not dangerous? All creation begins with misunderstanding. He left Chact standing before the mural and continued alone, descending into the lower sanctums where the heat of the planet beat faintly against his skin. The shard's echo within him pulsed stronger here. The hum he had once called dreaming had become a language, one without words, but full of direction. It pulled him deeper, past sealed corridors and forgotten chambers until he reached a hall he did not know. At its center stood an obelisk of translucent metal, taller than any structure remaining. It radiated a low vibration, neither mechanical nor divine, something in between. As he approached, the air shimmered, and images rose within its core, a spiral of stars, systems once ruled by the dynasty, all dimmed now to fading embers. A whisper accompanied them. There is more silence than song in the void. Would you have it otherwise? He did not answer immediately. The question was too large. Silence is the only thing we've ever kept, he said finally. Even when we spoke. Then learn to keep it kindly, the voice replied. The stars within the obelisk rearranged into a map, pathways extending from this world toward unmarked coordinates. Each route pulsed faintly, as if waiting for acknowledgement. Others sleep as you did, the voice continued. Some dream still of conquest, some of redemption. You cannot hold them all, but you can remind them what the cost was. Menkot raised a hand to the surface. You would send me among them. Not to command, to witness. He felt the old resistance rise in him, the reflex of command, the instinct to shape outcomes instead of observe them. But that impulse felt brittle now, like an obsolete weapon. If I go, he said, who keeps the quiet here? They will, the voice answered. What you began is no longer yours. He watched as the obelisk dimmed, leaving only a faint line of light tracing across the floor, a direction pointing outward into the dark. The shard inside his chest resonated once, warm and final. He understood. When he emerged into the open again, the sun had begun to set. The new creatures, metallic, graceful, were gathering near the horizon, their bodies reflecting the amber sky. They sang without sound, a vibration that passed through the air like gentle thunder. The drones stood among them, motionless, listening. Chact met him at the base of the terrace. The northern machines have ceased expansion, he reported. They await signal. Then let them wait, Menkot said. He looked at the captain, the last soldier of a dynasty that had spanned galaxies. You have served beyond measure, Chact. You are free now. Free! The words seemed foreign on the warrior's tongue. Yes, Menkot said. You may choose your own ending, or no ending at all. Chact's gaze flickered toward the creatures by the horizon, then back to his lord. Then I will watch, he said, until I no longer need to. Menkot placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture from a time before circuits. Then we both serve silence. He turned east, where the wind carried faint tremors, the vibration of the obelisk's call reaching beyond the sky. The drones sensed it too. Their lights flickered in harmony. Above, the aurora gathered into a single ribbon, drawing a line across the firmament as if marking his path. Menkot walked toward it. The ground hummed beneath his steps, guiding him to the edge of the reconstructed plains. There, the sand parted like water, revealing a buried vessel, long, sleek, carved from obsidian that reflected stars even in daylight. It had been waiting, untouched, perhaps since the first dynasty's height. As he approached, The vessel stirred, dust slid away in sheets, engines sighing as they remembered their purpose. The ramp descended with the grace of inevitability. He paused at its threshold and looked back once. The world glowed faintly under its new sun, alive in a way it had never been while ruled. "Guard your quiet," he whispered. The wind answered with a note like a promise. He stepped inside. The interior came alive in gradients of dim gold. The systems recognized him not by code, but by essence. Panels unfolded, controls lit in slow sequence. The vessel rose, silent, a shadow lifting from the surface. Through its viewports, the planet receded, its light flickering against the black as though winking farewell. Stars stretched ahead, their distance collapsing into a path. Menkot felt no triumph, no grief, only the steady pulse of the shard that had once been a god and was now a memory carried inside him. The map waited in his mind, a network of sleeping worlds needing witness. He spoke to the silence as it enveloped him. "Let there be no more cages." The vessel vanished into the dark between suns, leaving behind a single whisper of light over a world that had begun to dream again. The ship drifted through the dark between suns, like a shard of forgotten intent. Stars bled across its hull in long, pale streaks, their light bending as if reluctant to touch the ancient metal. Within, Menkot sat in stillness before the navigation core. His form reflected 1,000-fold in the obsidian walls. The silence of space wrapped him like a familiar cloak, neither comfort nor punishment, merely continuation. The shard within his chest pulsed faintly, keeping rhythm with the hum of the vessel's engines. Each beat carried a whisper of the world he had left behind, now dimming in the distance, its glow fading to memory. He had not charted a destination. The ship flew where the map guided, along the paths the obelisk had shown, corridors of gravity where dead systems slept. As the stars thinned, the void deepened until even the sensors hesitated to define it. Somewhere in that infinite dark, other dynasties lingered, sleeping empires sealed inside their pride, awaiting an awakening that would never resemble mercy. Menkot closed his eyes and reached out through the data threads that connected him to the ship. The vessel responded like a living thing, opening its mind to his command. "Find them," he said softly. The stars began to move. Charts unfolded in his mind, constellations rewriting themselves into memories of conquest and ruin. Every dynasty had left its signature, a pattern of geometry carved into the fabric of the void, a mathematical scar proclaiming ownership. He traced one, faint but unmistakable, leading toward a cluster of dying suns. The symbols marked it as the Sarikan Empire, rivals once in life, kin in undeath. They had vanished during the Great Awakening, choosing to vanish rather than kneel to the Silent King's unification. Now, even that refusal had decayed into legend. The ship angled toward the cluster. Hours or centuries passed uncounted as time stretched and folded. When at last the stars grew dense again, he saw them, a chain of worlds orbiting a crimson dwarf, each one cracked open like an egg. Their surfaces glittered with the residue of failed resurrection protocols, tombs cannibalized by their own awakening routines. Menkot felt the echo of their signal, fragmented, desperate, repeating one question through eternity. Are we still here? He descended to the largest planet. The atmosphere was thin, the ground veined with rivers of liquid mercury. As the ship settled into the dust, the silence pressed down until even the hum of his core felt intrusive. He stepped onto the surface, his shadow stretching long across the plain. The horizon was littered with monoliths, half-buried command spires, their inscriptions eroded by radiation. He approached one and brushed away the dust. The glyphs were familiar, a creed of dominion, the Saracen vow that no god or rival would outlast them. The irony struck like a dull blade. A flicker stirred at the edge of his sensors, movement beneath the ground. He crouched, pressing a hand to the soil. Beneath the crust, faint vibrations patterned themselves into rhythm, the language of machine minds waking in confusion. He waited as the surface cracked open, and from the fissure rose figures cloaked in shadow, their bodies dull with corrosion. Necrons, but altered, leaner, their armor fused with strange organic filigree, as though evolution had touched even the undying. Their optics glowed a color not of this spectrum, and when they spoke, the sound was a chord rather than a voice. "You are late," they said, though he could not tell if it was accusation or welcome. "I am what remains," Menkot answered. The nearest stepped closer, studying him. "We felt the pulse of your sun. We thought it myth. It burned and it ended," he said. "What remains is choice." The word seemed to trouble them. "Choice was a disease," they replied. "It led us to silence." "And yet you speak," Menkot said. "You survived it." The leader tilted its head. "Not all. Most fell to dormancy. Some changed. The flesh that hated us became whisper and alloy, fusing with the machines we built to defy it. Now we are neither dynasty nor swarm. We are the question they left unanswered." He felt the shard within his chest respond, its pulse aligning with theirs. The resonance filled the air, subtle but profound. "Then you are the bridge," he said. They regarded him in stillness. "You carry something alive," they said. "It hums with memory. It remembers what gods fear." "It remembers choice," Menkot said again. The leader extended a hand. "Give it to us. Let it seed what we were." He looked at the open palm, the faint shimmer of potential trembling there. "No," he said. "It must travel farther. If you take it now, it will become another empire, another hunger." The figures regarded him without anger. "Then you will walk alone." "I have always walked alone." They stepped back, vanishing into the fissures, leaving him beneath the crimson sky. The wind carried faint harmonics, part farewell, part warning. Menkot turned toward the ship, the shard's pulse steady against his chest. As he ascended the ramp, he felt the faint tremor of awakening spreading through the planet below. The altered Necrons reconfiguring their tombs into new forms. They would rebuild, not as conquerors, but as witnesses, and that was enough. When the ship lifted, the ground below shimmered, releasing plumes of silver vapor that drifted upward like incense. The world did not call him back. It had chosen its own silence. He journeyed on. System by system, he moved through the remnants of fallen empires. Some he found empty, reduced to dust. Others thrived in strange half-life, worshipping echoes of themselves. Everywhere he saw reflections of his own past, pride calcified into monument, ambition into ruin. He did not interfere. He only recorded, adding each finding to the growing archive stored within the shard. It no longer burned, it breathed. Its pulse had softened into something almost human. On the 50th world, he found a sea made of light. The surface rippled like glass, and beneath it moved shapes that were not quite alive, but dreamed of being so. When he touched the water, it sang, notes that resonated with his core until he felt memory dissolve into melody. For a moment, he was not Pharaon, not machine, not myth. He was the echo of a mortal heartbeat under stars that had never known his name. When the sound faded, he looked up. Above him stretched the path of the obelisk, still glowing faintly in his mind, its last coordinate marked beyond any charted galaxy. The shard within him warmed, urging him onward. He smiled, small, weary, unrecorded. Then let's see what silence builds next. The engines flared, scattering fragments of starlight. The vessel turned toward the edge of all known space, where the blackness deepened into possibility. As it vanished into the endless dark, the stars behind him flickered once, as if bowing farewell. And the universe, older and quieter now, listened. The edge of the galaxy was not a line, but a silence. Menkot's ship drifted into it, the stars thinning until they became whispers of light. The void ahead was pure absence, a darkness unbroken by reflection or law. His sensors found nothing to name. It was here, at the rim of existence, that the obelisk's final signal had ended. The shard in his chest pulsed once, faint as breath. He understood. This was not destination. It was invitation. He left the pilot's chair and moved through the corridors, his footsteps echoing softly against the hull. The vessel no longer felt like metal. It had taken on the stillness of thought. As he reached the observation deck, the walls melted to transparency. The universe sprawled beneath him, immense, wounded, and unknowable. A single thread of golden light stretched outward, vanishing into the dark. He followed it with his eyes, then with his will. The ship responded, drifting closer, until the thread expanded into form, a structure larger than worlds, woven from the residue of dead stars. It resembled neither machine nor God, but memory itself made visible. He felt it before he touched it, the weight of every silence, every extinction. The shard inside him sang softly, completing its long circuit of return. When he spoke, his voice was almost human. Is this where it began? The vast shape stirred. A response came not in words, but feeling. Recognition without hierarchy. Understanding without judgment. No beginning, no end, only witnessing. He knelt as the ship aligned with the lattice. Its light washed through him, dissolving distinction. For the first time since biotransference, he felt his mortality return, not as punishment, but as mercy. The cold precision of his form loosened. Circuits dimmed. Beneath the armor, echoes of heartbeat stirred. He was no longer eternal. He was momentary, and that was enough. The lattice shimmered, opening like a bloom. Energy flooded outward, carrying fragments of his memory. Wars, choices, the long sorrow of survival. They dispersed into the void like pollen, scattering across time. Somewhere, distant civilizations might one day dream fragments of his story and mistake them for their own. The shard's pulse slowed. Its last words unfolded within him like a sigh. Silence kept kindly, his creation reborn. Menkot smiled, or something close to it. The ship dissolved around him, absorbed by the golden structure. His body disassembled into light, every atom translated into data, every thought into song. The universe exhaled, and the darkness brightened just enough to remember him. Far away, on the world he had left, dawn broke for the 1000th time, and the new life he had freed raised its face to a sky that finally knew peace. The light that had consumed Menkot did not fade. It dispersed, threading itself through the lattice until the structure itself became translucent with memory. Across the void, the golden network rippled outward, carrying fragments of his consciousness into the silence between galaxies. The pulse that had been his heartbeat now moved through the dust of stars, a rhythm too soft for any living thing to hear, yet strong enough to remind the void it was not alone. The remnants of the ship dissolved completely, its matter reduced to song. Within that resonance, something stirred, the faint echo of awareness, not bound to form, but to intention. He could not see, but he perceived the vast sweep of creation as if it were breath. Every star burned within him like a recollection. He was not Menkot the ruler, nor Menkot the survivor, but the idea of endurance itself. The shard that had lived within his chest, uncoiled, no longer distinct from him. Together they became rhythm and observation, guardian and witness. The lattice shifted shape, bending toward the edges of time, weaving corridors of light between sleeping civilizations. Through those corridors, whispers passed, seeds of memory, fragments of compassion, echoes of forgotten restraint. On distant worlds, creatures paused in their small rituals and looked up, sensing something vast and kind pressing gently against their sky. None would name it. None would know it was the remnant of a dynasty that had once built cages for gods. The golden web crossed constellations, settling wherever silence had been wounded by war. It healed not through force, but through remembrance. Each flicker of light became a monument to restraint, a reminder that power and mercy could share the same pulse. In the heart of the void, Menkot's last awareness folded into stillness. Yet from that stillness came creation again. The lattice began forming new stars, not brilliant like the first fires of the cosmos, but quiet, deliberate lights that would never rage, only glow. They hung in symmetrical grace, each one holding the memory of a decision not to destroy. The golden light dimmed into natural color, indistinguishable from the fabric of the universe. His name, once spoken with reverence and fear, dissolved from history, leaving only the phenomenon of renewal. The universe continued to expand, carrying traces of his story as whispers in radiation, as faint warmth in the empty reaches between galaxies. There was no monument, no empire, only balance. Where once hunger had ruled, silence now endured, gentle and infinite, holding space for whatever might awaken next. The world Menkot had left behind revolved slowly under its small, forgiving sun. Millennia passed, and the surface changed. The metallic soil softened, forests of glass and light rose where pylons had once stood, each leaf resonating faintly with the harmony of the hollow sun's last breath. The new beings, the ones born of drone and dream, walked among these living forests, neither fully machine nor mortal. They carried within them the pulse Menkot had left behind, an instinct to build without ruling, to learn without conquering. In the ruins of the first city, a single spire remained. Its foundations had fused into crystal, and from its apex, a soft glow marked the passing of each dawn. The beings called it the Listening Tower. It did not transmit, it received. When storms rolled over the plains, it hummed in sympathy. When night came, it drew faint light from the stars and sang to itself in frequencies older than language. Some said it listened to the past. Others said it was the past, remembering itself softly so the world could sleep without fear. At the base of the tower lay carvings that none of them understood, lines etched in patterns too precise for chance. Children traced them with their fingers, feeling warmth bloom beneath the surface. The oldest among them whispered that they were names, once belonging to those who had dreamed the world awake. None knew of pharaoh or dynasty, yet reverence lingered, instinctive and wordless. The sun climbed higher through the centuries, and the golden lichen that once crawled through the ruins spread into oceans. Its glow was faint but constant, a planetary heartbeat visible from orbit. Long after the last memory of the Necron name had faded from history, travelers from distant systems would pass this world and note the shimmer across its seas. They would call it a cradle, a world that sang peace to the void. And perhaps, on the edge of the atmosphere where sound dissolves into starlight, something unseen would answer, a faint harmonic echo, ancient and familiar. For a moment, the light above the listening tower would brighten, not as flame, but as recognition. Then it would fade again, leaving only calm. Beneath that sky, life continued, slow, unhurried, unafraid. No gods, no empires, only silence shaped into understanding. The dynasty had become myth, and the myth had become the rhythm of the world itself. In that quiet rhythm, somewhere between dusk and dawn, the universe remembered the name it no longer needed to speak, Menkot, and smiled. The world turned beneath the quiet stars, its oceans glimmering faintly with the pulse that once lived in Menkot's heart. Seasons passed like slow breaths, and the luminous forests deepened, their roots threading through ruins that had forgotten their names. The beings who walked this earth grew wiser with each century, though they no longer called it wisdom, only listening. They learned to hear the world's hidden rhythms, the hum of the deep minerals, the sigh of magnetic winds, the subtle murmurs that rose from the veins of gold light running beneath the crust. They did not know they were echoes of a lattice that had once caged a god. In the stillness between twilight and dawn, one of them, a child whose eyes reflected both machine and sky, climbed the hill beyond the listening tower. The air was clear, the night scattered with drifting auroras. She sat at the summit and placed her hand on the ground. Beneath her palm, the earth answered, faint and alive. It spoke not in language, but in warmth. She did not question what it meant. Some truths required no translation. Far above, on the threshold of the void, the lattice that had carried Menkot's essence pulsed one final time. The golden structure had dimmed across eons, its threads now as thin as breath, yet it still reached toward the living worlds. In that fading network stirred a last reflection of consciousness. No longer a being, only awareness folded into the memory of light. The lattice had fulfilled its task. It had witnessed creation, learned silence without fear. It had healed the wound between survival and compassion. It did not need to endure. With slow grace, it began to unravel. Filaments of radiance detached, drifting into darkness like seeds cast upon eternal wind. Some would ignite as nebulae, others would cool into starlit dust. Each fragment carried the memory of restraint, the quiet strength of a civilization that had chosen peace over power. None would remember Menkot's face, but all would bear his echo. On the world below, dawn approached. The child lifted her gaze to the sky and saw a streak of gold fall across the horizon, a fragment of the dying lattice burning gently as it entered the atmosphere. It dissolved before reaching the ground, leaving only warmth on her skin and a feeling she could not name. She smiled, sensing that something vast had said farewell. The wind carried the shimmer onward, across oceans and forests, scattering it among all who breathed. For a moment, every living thing paused, aware of the same stillness, the heartbeat of creation at rest. Then time moved again, unhurried, endless, whole. And the universe, wrapped in its newfound quiet, dreamed. The final pulse of the lattice faded into the void, leaving the tomb world beneath quiet as an unspoken prayer. Dust drifted across shattered pylons, settling into grooves that had once carried light like veins. Menkot's essence, now dispersed through the lattice's remnants, no longer touched flesh or metal. It existed as memory, as rhythm as the faintest hum between stars. The shard, once the pulse of a god contained, had become part of the world's quiet heartbeat, embedded in rivers of light and in the whispering roots of luminous forests. On the surface, the metallic planes glimmered faintly, reflecting the pale sun that had returned to its rightful place in the sky. Forests of living glass and gold-threaded foliage stretched across the land, their leaves vibrating gently with residual harmonics from the lattice. The beings who had inherited the world moved among them, unaware of the legacy that had shaped their steps. They listened, but not for command. They observed, shaped, and learned, carrying within them the echo of restraint that Menkot had left behind. Above the horizon, the auroras writhed in slow, meditative arcs, as if the atmosphere itself remembered the pulse of sacrifice. The listening tower remained, its spire a thin ribbon of translucent light that had once guided memory into form. From its apex, subtle waves of resonance passed into the sky, brushing against the stars and seeding their faint energy across neighboring systems. Nothing outside could name it, yet all who passed felt it. A gentle weight, a pause in eternity that acknowledged what had been endured. Time continued its steady passage, measured not by calendars or hours, but by the slow, deliberate rhythms of a world reborn. Oceans of silver reflected pale dawns, and winds carried whispers across plains and ruins alike. In each soundless vibration, the memory of Menkot persisted, not as presence, not as ruler, not as immortal, but as witness. He had endured to show that even in silence, choices could echo, even when all else faded. The last remnants of the shard, now dispersed into the planet's biosphere, pulsed once more, faint as a thought. It brushed against the roots of forests, across the shells of creatures newly awakened to their freedom, across the stone and glass of ruins where nothing lived but memory. The pulse faded, leaving warmth behind, a promise, a lesson, and the quiet weight of consequence. Above, the stars watched silently as the world turned. The pale sun rose higher, and for the first time in ages, the planet exhaled in unison with the universe. There was no throne to occupy, no empire to command, no god to contain. Only balance remained, fragile yet enduring, a living testament to the cost of choice and the end of an era. In that quiet, the planet and its children, the living and the machine-born alike, moved through the slow rhythms of dawn, carrying the echoes of what had been and the promise of what could grow from silence. The galaxy watched, patient and unknowing. The past was honored in memory, the present held in quiet stewardship, and the future stretched like a blank, infinite canvas. The last heartbeat of the dynasty, of Menkot, of all that had once been, rested finally. And the world, beneath its quiet stars, began to breathe again,